Hi. Hi, Ronnie. Uh, let's see. Gives sent down increased insolence and defiance. We have sown enmity and hatred amongst them till the day of resurrection. Whenever they kindle the fire of war, God will put it out. They try to spread corruption in the land, but God does not love those who corrupt. Are you atheist? Yes, I am very atheist. I'm like viciously anti-theistic. Nothing good to say about religion. If only the people of the book would believe and be mindful of God, we would take away their sins and bring them to the gardens of delight. Richard Dawkins or Hitchens? I'm probably more Hitchens type. I mean, yeah, I'm definitely more Hitchens. I mean, I like. I think I was more Dawkins in the beginning, more of the sort of uh, more more in the sort of scientific camp, and more of it being sort of a curiosity. I also quite like. I don't have the book here right now. I like Dan Dennett's idea of it sort of as a fascinating social phenomena, I'm kind of like, if I'm being really nice, if I'm being on my most Hitchensy day, yeah, if I'm being more polite, then I'm thinking like then I'm thinking about it as primitive moral philosophy, and it's like, oh, fine, yeah, sure, this is thousands of years ago, I guess. Guess this is the best they could do. I mean, sure, I think Aristotle and Plato did it better, but it's good enough. Um, have you read The God Delusion? Yeah, I read The God Delusion. I guess it was now 16 years ago, pretty much. Funny story about my reading The God Delusion. What happened was I had just read it, and we were having econ class, and I knew a friend of mine was a devout Christian, and I just couldn't stop talking to him in the middle of class. It was so, the teacher was just completely blown away by how rude I was, and I mean, in retrospect, I'm a little bit like, it makes me blush a little bit, but it wasn't exactly the most nicest I've ever been. But yeah, no, I think I've, apart from how I'm behaving right now, I think I've kind of calmed down a little bit, and I don't spend as much time sort of hunting down religious people. But for at least like 5 years, I hunted. Well, I lost a lot of friends. No, I think actually, other than that, like, he thought I was an asshole for interrupting class. He understood that I like genuinely was curious about it, and most of the people who I argue with understand that I want to argue, and also I understand that they don't want to argue. So most of the people I've made into enemies has been online. Um, like, spent a lot of time arguing with creationists. Spent a lot of time, yeah, like my entire life is built on this, starting with arguing with religion, and then like being ultra atheist, and then I was argued with religious people for many years, and then suddenly they did the atheism plus, and then I was like, well, okay, now I have a new enemy, and that's all of this sort of feminism stuff, and then I argued with that against for many years. uh, well, no point in arguing with creationists. I'll That's actually kind of interesting. But how many books do you read after 1 year? That's very variable. Recently, not as much. It's been sort of probably just one a month. So maybe like, yeah, maybe like 12 a year. But on the question of arguing with creationists, I think actually, I think the most important thing to think of it is you're arguing for your own sake. You're not arguing because you think you're going to convince them. That's obviously not going to happen. That's pointless. But you're like arguing with flat earthers is something I found really fun and interesting, because I got to sort of go through all of the physics, like the high school physics I did, and be like, oh yeah, that's interesting. Like just sort of reminding myself of how to think in this kind of cool way. And I realized like most people, well, who believes in flat Earth? I don't know. I think I met one, and it was weird. I was at a party, and he was like, the conversation started kind of innocently. He was like, there's so much in the universe we don't know, and I don't like that science sort of pretends that we know. And that was as edgy as he got. And I was like, oh yeah, I agree, there's so much we don't know. And then I sort of listed off all of the sort of weird physics things, and eventually he sort of had to interrupt because obviously it seemed like we knew a lot more than he thought we knew. And what then happened was he's like, oh, but we don't know, like, why is everything so on a plane? And I was like, oh, that's very easy because of all the gravity attraction. If you imagine it many years, even if they were like randomly in different locations and constellations moving around, eventually they'll drag each other down onto the same level. So it's, I mean, there probably aren't a lot of flat earthers, but if you find these extreme points of view, I mean, you get the same effort if you argue with pseudoscientists, like with various new age hippie stuff, various sort of alt medicine stuff. You get, yeah. If only people paid attention in science class. Yeah, I think the problem actually is that the people who pay attention in science class still fuck it up. Uh, because it sort of just gives them, like, what I've been sort of repeating a lot in reading this is the problem with religion. The reason I'm so anti-theist is it gives people an excuse to think they have access to certain knowledge. So if people instead sort of, and people can end up doing the same thing when they like think they know all the science, and you like they forget that, oh yeah, science is very like gradual and you don't really know things. But have you ever made anyone non-religious? Oh god, that I don't know. I don't think so. I think most of the people, actually, I have a better answer for you than that. Other people have made me non-religious. So when I first, so I grew up in London. I'm Norwegian, and when I was 2, moved to London, lived there until I was 11, and then we moved back to Norway. And when I was living in London, I went to like an American school and stuff, and I was very religious. Really, I was very Christian. I started like reading parts of the Bible. Very thought God was very fascinating. I came to Norway, and it's such a weird thing. And you're gonna like it's frustrating, honestly. What happened was they asked me, "Do you do you really believe in God?" I was like, "Yeah." And then they said, "Oh," and they sort of embarrassingly turned away from me as if they didn't want to talk about it more. Like they sort of respected my belief, but they, or not that like they clearly didn't believe in it. And that was enough for me. That was like, as soon as it was like, wait, it's possible not to believe in God, and then I gradually became an atheist. So hula hula dancer is a Christian. If you want to, we can spend the next half an hour shitting on your religion. I mean, I will probably do it accidentally because there is a lot of mention of the people in the book in this text. He has earlier mentioned. Earlier, there was a weird moment where I was talking about the Trinity, because the Muslims, of course, reject the divinity of Jesus. So there's been a little bit of Christianity bashing already today. Uh, but yeah, childhood indoctrination, 100%. It was just, for me, it was just impossible to imagine a reality in which the Bible wasn't exactly as true as it sort of I read it. Like it's just sort of like, yeah, I just sort of autopiloted being religious, and as soon as I realized I didn't have to, then I radically changed. I mainly believe in spirituality in general. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's most people, and that's sort of why we get this. Why at which point I sort of don't care anymore. What I'm like, the thing I really don't like about religions is when people use it to justify certain knowledge. That's like the way to sort of summarize it most efficiently. If you know, if you know you're certain you believe something, and you're certain that what you believe is the truth, and it doesn't matter what anyone else believes, it doesn't matter what evidence you get, you know that you know the truth. A Hindu or a Buddhist. I met at least a Buddhist. I think Yeah, a Buddhist was quite recent. I mean, I say quite recently. It was like 5 or 6 years ago now, and very chill guy. Very nice to talk to. But I don't. I think if I've met any Hindus, we've it's not been we've not spoken of religion really at any point. And Buddhists are really annoying to speak to with religion, not with, honestly, because you sort of just it feels like they're dodging every question, but it does fit with their theology, so I can't really blame them too much. But yeah, how about you? Have you met anyone? Before I continue, I'm a little bit cold. I'm actually gonna wrap myself in this. Cloak myself in a blanket. Yeah, exactly. Buddhism is no god. I mean, I guess maybe that's why I like them, or because they are why I'm frustrated by them, because they're, yeah, not they can't use they can't use it. They don't have access to certain knowledge. They can only have access to certain knowledge when they like reach nirvana, and obviously they're not going to pretend like they've reached nirvana yet. I take religion more like a crutch for spirituality. That's interesting. What about any Muslim you meet? Honestly, not in person. I haven't had many discussions about religion with Muslims. Like most of the time when you meet Muslims, just talk about other things. Honestly, I have this sort of dress I like to wear, and a lot of people started saying like "Salam alaikum" to me, and like "Peace be with you" or whatever it means. And I didn't know that. I think it's "Alaikum al salam" is how you respond, but I didn't know it at the time. I'm curious, hula hula dancer. What do you sort of mean by spirituality? Because like I interpret that as I take religion more like a crutch for spirituality. Like religion is more like people who don't really get the spiritual element of reality is what I'm interpreting that as, and they're sort of using religion to reach that point without having to engage with it very much. But let's see, where were we? If I'm gonna read a little bit more because I'm kind of. Or actually, I'm gonna. I'm not even halfway. Okay, well, it's gonna be fun. When was the last time I went to church? Oh, I'm in funerals, of course. But I mean, you mean for a service? The last time I went to church for a service was, I think, when I got my confirmation. So again, like 15 years ago at this point. It's, yeah, it's been a while. I mean, I wasn't very church going before then. Like, we're Norwegian. Norwegians aren't really, yeah, we're not big on the going to church. Is like you go for Christmas, you go for big life events, and you have the funeral and stuff. Have you already changed? I think I did. It's quite important that you actually do that in Norway because they get less state money if you do that. I'm pretty sure I did sign off because they made it easier. They used to you used to need to like print out a sheet, write it down that you want to quit, and then go to a church and hand it in, which basically gives them the opportunity to try and convert you back, which was obviously a bad idea. But I feel like I'm pretty sure you now can just sign off online. Because I should probably mention in Norway you are automatically applied to the church. Who is the most dumb religious person you ever met? Hmm. Most dumb religious. Oh, I met a friend of mine. Revealed we were very drunk, but a friend of mine revealed mid alcohol induced conversation that he didn't believe in evolution, and it was such a stunner because there were four of us in this conversation. There was me, ultra anti-theist. There was a friend of mine who's like mildly atheist, like more like secular and irreligious, and then there's Another friend of mine who's religious but sort of moderately religious, and very a lot of like Norwegian Christians are very moderately religious and accept most of science. And then there was this guy, and we sort of never discussed as much religion with him before. I knew him from before. I knew him from playing soccer with him, football as we say, and I knew him from before. But in that drunken conversation, it was like we were just talking, I was generally being critical and pointing fingers and saying like, well, why don't you believe literally what's said in the Bible? And he said like, yes, I do. Literally, I can't I was like, you don't believe in evolution? No, it doesn't make sense. I can't understand it. And it would completely derailed the whole conversation. And you saw like the other religious guy sort of slowly inching away from him, playing like, oh, well, now I don't want you on my side. It used to be 2 versus 2, but it ended up being like 3 versus 1, just all of us trying to convince him. Actually, things did evolve over billions of years. Maybe that's a better way of me actually warming up. If I'm cold, I need to take my hair down. Ah. Well, that was a fun experience. But honestly, yeah, exactly. Trying to prove that is the most that is I want to probably not use the word suicidal in the context of an Islamophobe read stuff, but religious people trying to sort of argue that their text is scientific, you immediately lose. I'm like, if I hear anyone try to do that in my presence, I like get gleeful. I don't even pounce right away. At that point, you just want to give them as much rope as you possibly can. It's so good. You can get so much stupid shit out of them, and it's so much fun to just sort of let them enjoy. Yeah, let them try and justify that these weird sort of corners of the earth. Like honestly, if you read the Bible very literally, it's like, oh, it's flat, it's square, and the world is so weird. Oh, but what I do like, there's a creative writing project I kind of did once where you can make it so that you try and sort of imagine would it be like if you were God and you were actually trying to explain science to these Bronze Age illiterate nomads, whose the largest number they had ever seen was probably 1,000. Maybe they'd seen like 1,000 sheep once in their life. Like maybe all of the sheep they gathered, all of the goats from all of the people they had ever known. That was like 1,000. That's the biggest number they've ever seen. And you're like putting yourself in the mind of God. You're trying to explain to them what 13.8 billion years ago, what happened then. It's like, oh yeah, now it is when I do think of it like that, I am much more sympathetic to the religious perspective, because clearly it's impossible for even a god to sort of get that message through. The reality we live in is far too complicated. The scientific reality is far too complicated and interesting. So yeah, it doesn't make it makes me more sympathetic, and it's more funny. It's very comedic to imagine that conversation. If only the people of the book would believe and be mindful of God. How do you derive moral principles? Oh my God, that's a really big. Like, yeah, okay, now I have to focus. Okay, how do we derive moral principles? I tend to. So the reason I think it's such an interesting question is because actually what I want to say is the virtue ethics argument. So I should warn you here. I studied philosophy. I got like an E in ethics, so I'm probably not like qualified to have any smart opinions. But I did study philosophy, so I'm not like completely out of nowhere here. I'm probably going to use some of the words. And I before I did that, I was very utilitarianism. It was very sort of the logic was very clear. Yeah, you've read philosophy exactly, so you'll know. Good, I can use the words. And like read John Stuart Mill on liberty. Read the sort of arguments about Bentham's consequentialism and sort of the idea of that really appealed to me much more so than Kant's ideas. But then I sort of gradually came to sort of realize, like, feel like there were some flaws in both of them, and also like there's a bit of a difference in how we actually think of ethics and how we actually show our ethics. I think that's, yeah. So I was like, the way I'm trying to decide what actions I should do and how I should decide what actions I should do. I try to base it on sort of this idea of a virtuous person. But what I'm essentially then doing is just saying, well, it is inherently, there is some sort of inherent truth that we can understand, but I don't really I'm just kicking the can down the road. I'm just saying that we have this image of what a good person is, and we can sort of influence this maybe by reason, but I'm just relying on this very vague emotional argument. But I do not, like, man search, yeah, sort of. We're trying to find out what the real moral system is, and I think I think we don't have perfect access to this information, like all information, but it's I think what because what being good is, what ethics is more like, if we go a little bit analytically or a little bit sort of cynically, it's just a way of being social, right? So my image of what a virtue, what is virtuous, is probably best described by a sort of cynical, or by how I want to interact with other people. And actually, I think imagining it like that makes it easier for you to accept the kinds of immorality you should be willing to go for. What about nihilism? Actually, that kind of continues here, because like I think it is more true that there, like, for long periods of my life, I would like I felt like I found out what this virtuous person is, what this ideal person is, and I tried to live according to it. But I realized I didn't actually want to live according to it. It's like, I think it's more productive more and more as I grow older to think of ethics as a sort of function system. And maybe that is true then, that it doesn't really exist. It doesn't. It isn't. There isn't the moral nihilism argument, but it's more like a functionally, what is it I want to achieve? Like, how do I want to engage with the people in my life, and how, like, do I have to be like so open, and like Berkeley's calculus? Not sure. I remember that. I feel vaguely like I've heard about it, but yeah, probably. Let's look it up. Let's look it up. Berkeley's calculus. Berkeley's calculus. Am I doing it wrong? Is it? Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I know what you're referring to. But yeah, I mean, it might be. Yeah, that I mean. What was talking? Yeah, I mean, there is whatever you meant to, or whatever it is. The important thing is the idea itself. It doesn't matter what it's named. It doesn't really. I mean, that's the problem with philosophy, right? You end up just sort of citing everything. But yeah, I think this sort of cynical. I want to, like, who do I want to engage with? Who do I care about? Who do I want to be nice to? I kind of rationalized it as there are evil people in your life, but I think it's more important. Like, there are people in my life. There were people in my life I just didn't care for, and so why am I being nice to them? Like, oh, but you're a good person, so you should be nice to people. But no, really, no. I should be nice to people if it's sort of, if I want to be with them. Like, being their friends is only, honestly, this sort of cynical, self-interested egoism has a lot going for it, and I want to extrapolate, because there's something I've been thinking about recently, is the opportunity cost. So there's a concept in economics called the opportunity cost. I'm just going to explain that in case you don't know, but where after you, like, depending, you only have so much money, right? So if you spend it on one thing, then you don't have that money to spend on something else. And so the argument I sort of made is, well, see, Claire, you're very well read. You're just here to sort of hear somebody validate, have the same opinions as you. I'm preaching to the choir. But yeah, now, so the idea of of the sort of you spend at certain things. So if we say that we care about other people, we say that we care, we feel for the suffering of like the starving children in Africa, like don't we care about these people? But then we go and spend money on movies. So which is it? Like you know about opportunity cost. Like yeah, the opportunity cost, the moral implications of opportunity cost are actually kind of horrifying, because I think what we should be realizing here is that the real ethical system that most of us use is how close are you to me? If I can see you, then I care about your suffering, and I care about it a lot more than if I can't see you. And it's like the people who are far enough away from us, I don't care about very much. And I can sort of prove it because, well, I care and more about my fleeting happiness from watching a movie, from going to a Marvel movie. If you like think about how many billions of dollars we as consumers have spent on tickets for Marvel movies, clearly we as consumers care more about watching Marvel movies, care more about this fleeting entertainment than we care about the suffering of people. Drowning child thought experiment. Okay, cool. I like that. I feel like, yeah. So, yeah. Actually, no, I have heard about that. I have heard about that. Yeah. I've heard about that recently. Actually, I thought it was. I think it was in context of some. I don't actually remember the context, but yeah, it seems to me. Wait, was that Peter Singer's argument? Because there's a YouTube video I've saved, called Peter Singer's most controversial ethics paper about people not being moral. Yeah, okay, it is that one. Yeah. Um. So yeah, no, I think like the more I think about it, that's the convincing argument to me. Is like, oh, actually, what we think about or what we've sort of reasoned ourselves into as what is moral is radically different from what our actions show we think of as moral. So it's I don't know what that means. I don't know what the conclusions are. I don't know if there's anything. And we can open it as well, just so I know that I'm doing it properly. But oh yeah, just Reddit stuff. Let's not go into Reddit's arguments about that. But yeah, I don't know if what the implications are beyond the fact that we're maybe lying to ourselves about how good we are, or lying to ourselves about what goodness really means. But I think there might be a little bit of usefulness in trying to do things. I don't know. I mean, in trying to sort of understand this, in order to understand how to save the world, right? If we want to fix things in the world, we actually have to really confront the fact that we don't care about people who are that far away. Right? We won't save the drowning child if it comes at a sufficient financial cost to us. We care more about ourselves and then less about things that are slightly further away. Like we care more about ourselves and then family and then clan and then and then nation state and then humans and then animals. And obviously this is probably not always good, but it is, and you can take it to the extreme, but what if more and more child keeps drowning? How many children will you save? I mean, I think it's just, I think it becomes a utilitarian question again. It just so happens that we're not actually, we're caring about a subjective utility. And it's sort of we're viewing it from sort of, well, you keep saying, yeah, exactly, like, and that's the argument where sort of we have to deal with all of the time, is like, well, even if we genuinely convince ourselves that we do care about the starving children in Africa, we can only save so many of them. So do you like work yourself into exhaustion? Is it more moral then to try and find a balanced work-life Bentham's calculus? See, oh yeah, of course it's Bentham's calculus, right? It's Bentham being the father of consequentialism. We should have realized that. But so Philosophic calculus. Oh, that's good. We should call it philosophic calculus, honestly. That's a fantastic word. It's a fantastic word. Anyway, yeah, it's. We've sort of gone full circle. I think that maybe that's the moral philosophy we should, or the moral philosophy comes back to. It is a sort of utilitarian calculus we're doing, but it's more about. But we have to sort of respect the idea that. Actually, maybe I can make an argument for it. You can argue that there's sort of the epistemological problem to, well, what's the solution to the problem? It depends. It depends. Honestly, probably whatever feels right. Honestly, weirdly enough, as that sounds. But like, what would I do? What would I do in the trolley problem? I want to. What would I do in the trolley problem? If we're trying to use this like proximal, what I think actually the most efficient way of inducing ethical behavior is this rationalization that it's about you thinking highly of yourself. So that's kind of the problem with the trolley problem, is that you have this sort of conflict there, because I might rationalize to myself that I will feel more highly of myself for having made the hard choice to save more people, right? I had to choose to kill someone to save more people, and that makes me think more highly of myself. But someone else might think less of themselves because they had to make the choice where their action led to someone's life being lost. So I think maybe the trolley problem just sort of highlights what is, yeah, what we're getting at here, what we're trying to sort of discover is that actually what being moral is about is justifying to yourself that you're a good person, or like convincing, like feeding your ego. That's what being moral is about. It's really about sort of, yeah, I mean, and if it's sacrificing a close family member, I think it comes back to the question, does it make me feel more moral? Does it make me feel like a better person? Does it make me feel like I'm such a great person? Maybe I don't have the strength for it. Maybe I will choose to sacrifice many people. And also, how many other people are on the track? Are there 2 people? Are there 5 people? Are there 20 people? And if are there enough people that maybe their bodies will slow down the train, so maybe not all of them die? I mean, just to be more absurd about it. But I think the calculus becomes harder and harder the more you change the system. But I think what it really comes down to is you do the thing that makes you feel like you're a good person. Isn't it a narcissistic view? I think maybe we are a little bit narcissistic, but maybe it's more of a solipsistic view. Maybe it's sort of what the problem is that we don't have certain knowledge of anything other than our own mind. And maybe the further away things come from us, the less certain our knowledge is, the less confident maybe our knowledge is. So maybe it's not actually about loving ourselves so much. It's more about, well, I don't actually know. Maybe all of the 5 people that if there are 5 people on one track and 1 person on the other track, maybe those 5 people are all evil bastards. I don't know. But my close family member, I know that they're very good, so let's kill the evil bastards, right? The fact is, sure, it might be narcissistic, but it might just be sort of limitations of our knowledge. I don't know. What do you think? What's your solution? That's the best philosopher answer. It's like, well, I don't know. What do you think? Human rights concept. Well, you can justify that sort of narcissistically too, right? I want certain rights, therefore I have to justify it to other people. That's a Socratic method. Yeah, it is. But I want to stress this. I'm pretty sure that Socrates was an argumentative asshole. He was his goal in life, and I take the Diogenes interpretation of what Socrates was trying to do. I think it was more of I think you're all wrong. Like this statement, all that I know is that I know nothing, is taken to be this sort of wise, humility, accepting thing. But if you imagine using that in an argument, what you're trying to say is, oh, I know that I don't know anything. So how come you are so certain? Oh, please share your certainty with me so that I might join you in your confidence. And you're like just clearly making fun of the person you're talking to and trying to get them to admit that they don't have the confidence they have. The Diogenes and Alexander anecdote is mwah. And again, I would interpret that as I think that probably I want to write this one day. I think that probably what happened there was Alexander was like, this guy is what who's everyone saying, oh, he's so fucking wise, and he's trying to make fun of him. This statement like, I am the most powerful man on earth. I want to prove to you that you're sort of non pretending not to care about any worldly delights. I want to prove to you that you do care, and so I'm just going to give you a carte blanche. You can ask me for anything. I won't judge you. I won't say anything. I just need to, like, in his mind he was saying like, I need to know that you're actually just as hedonistic as all of us. And then Diogenes actually slam dunks him and says, you know what, step aside. Lamp in daylight to find a wise man. Yeah. I thought it was an honest man, but maybe it's a wise man. I don't remember. I mean, honestly, Diogenes is the favorite character. I think I'm more and more, and I think it's also important to remember the sort of philosophical cynicism. Cynicism is becoming like a dirty word. I want to reclaim that word. I think being cynical is a good word. We should be cynical. We should sort of embrace the not just like cynical for this, not sort of full of ourselves cynical, but sort of cynical in the sense that everyone is a stupid asshole. Me too. I'm also a stupid asshole. Let's go around and be stupid assholes all together. Like I like my favorite story is the one with the hands, when he throws away his bowl because he saw a child who just cupped his hands, and it's like he spent, how much of my life have I wasted carrying around this bowl? And the dog went, yeah, I mean, that's why I like sort of cynicism being reclaimed, is the word kunikos coming from the sort of the dog man. I'm sure he would love it if I called him the dog botherer. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me disparaging him, as I'm sure he would disparage me if he saw me. Yeah, that's why I kind of like what I actually frame it as. I think cynicism is the antidote to sophistry. So sure, I'm sure there's many ways of cynicism being sort of bad, but cynicism in this world where a lot of people are trying to lie to us all of the time, and everyone just paints themselves with sort of nice words. It was an honest man, yeah, exactly. So good. But in this world where everyone is sort of describing themselves, I mean, he had found a wise man. He had once met Socrates, so he probably knew that wise man in theory existed, but honest man, not so much. But I think, I've completely spaced. Yeah, no, I think, cynicism, yeah, with loads of people trying to lie to us, I think the ability to sort of pierce through the language people are using and sort of think, well, what if I interpret everything you say in the most negative way possible? Like, how is it possible? I did that as a writing exercise actually quite recently. I don't know if you know about you probably know the Am I the Asshole subreddits. There's this subreddit called Am I the Angel, where they make fun of them, and they had posted this making fun of one of them, and I tried to just sort of, there's so many gaps in the story, I felt like, or so many potential gaps, like where people could just lie by omission, that if you really turn on the hyper cynical part of your brain, you can get this. It's you can really see that how easy it is to be lied to. Yeah, healthy skepticism is important, but I'm sort of I'm trying to sort of be a little bit unhealthy about it, like a bit Diogenes about it. I think maybe if I add some unhealthy skepticism to the mix, I think maybe we can highlight some of the weirdnesses being weird ways in which we're tricking ourselves even. I think one of the actually tricking ourselves is the most important thing here. Is the idea of so there was this argument my mother always used to use, or yeah, probably still would if I spoke that much to her. But is this argument like whenever I challenge my mother on why would you do that? And I was, oh, I had the best intentions. And I was like, everyone has the best intentions. That's like Hitler had the best intentions. I'm sure he did. Everyone, no matter how evil, no matter where on the scale you are. So I think that's what I mean by like this unhealthy skepticism. I want to when my mother spoke to me, I imagined it was Hitler. That's the amount of skepticism I went for. So I think maybe I went a little bit too far, but I think a little bit of that is necessary in this world. Where my cynicism proved to be accurate. Well, that's a weird question. So, for instance, one of the things I do is in my mind, the word terrorist and the word freedom fighter are referring to the same thing. The difference between a terrorist and a freedom fighter is perspective. A terrorist is the person you don't agree with doing violence for whatever cause, and a freedom fighter is a person who you do agree with doing violence for whatever cause. So when you ask, situation where my cynicism proved to be accurate, when I'm talking about cynicism here, I don't necessarily mean expecting the worst out of everyone. I mean like expecting them to do more bad things than they normally would do. I'm saying that what they do is like more of a reflection of sort of innate evilness. Like we were talking about, my moral philosophy is like, well, the reason we do good is because it makes us feel like we're good people. Right? That's what I mean by cynicism. So it's not like I'm predicting things. My sort of cynicism isn't like a scientific theory. I can't like predict people's behaviors, but I can sort of, it's more of like a framework for analyzing people's behaviors. And so, like you said, one man's terrorist, another man's freedom fighter. Exactly. It's not that yeah. It seems selfish. 100. It probably is 100%. I think I really like that way of thinking about it. That way of sort of twisting reality, of being like, well, it seems like I think in that vein recommend the book The Price of Altruism, which is more of a biography, but it has this sort of components of the game theory that inspired the selfish gene. I think the idea of being able to think of things in different terms, and more like in more terms that are like typically considered cynical and like selfish, right? And like where I judge people using all of these negatively charged words, and where it's like, but yeah, we're all like this. I do things because it makes me feel more moral, right? Even though it doesn't make you lesser or good or bad based on the words I would use to describe you. It does make, sometimes we get these weird social situations where I'm using like extremely negatively charged words to describe something, which I mean, even though I think positively of it, but I'm using negatively charged words just to sort of think critically about it. I think actually the guy Nilsson earlier who said interesting, he is a person I know in real life. So I've had discussions with him, and he's been looking at me like, what do you mean? You're using all of these negatively charged words. I don't understand what I'm supposed to feel about what you're saying. And I sort of have to adjust myself. Oh. Well, this was a very fun and interesting talk. We got really deep into stuff. I kind of forgot all about the religion stuff though. So we're halfway. Nice talking to you. Gotta go. That's perfect timing. I'll keep going. Thank you very much for talking. When do you stream? I think I'm gonna start a schedule now where I stream every day at 6 p.m. my time. So that's about 2 hours ago. I've started streaming. I've been streaming every day this year, so I'm gonna start doing that. It's like GMT +1 is my time zone, so whatever that calculation works out for you.